What's up, everybody? Right?
Hello, and welcome to everybody here on Facebook Live. This over here is Josh Weidman. My name is Judah Hoover, and this guy right down here is the legendary Greg Swan from Arizona. We woke him up, and actually, I don't know. Greg, you post on Facebook pretty early in the morning. For me, like there's times I'm up at 7 or 8 o'clock, and I see that you've already posted something. What time you live out there in Arizona? But what time do you typically wake up in the morning, my friend?
I don't. I've lived my whole life eviscerating everything that is normal in a human body. So I've completely destroyed my cold adaptability. I can't go north in the winter anymore. I just can't.
Right.
I lived for years without sleeping. When I was young, I would go 3, 4, 5 days at a time without sleeping. Now I sleep. If I can sleep 3 hours in a stretch, it's a great big deal. I sleep in naps.
And to get that kind of ability, like that's like superhero.
This is not a gift. This is not a gift. This is a lifelong mistakes that have salutary consequences, but nevertheless, like for instance, not being able to tolerate the cold is not a good thing. And I literally did that to myself. When I was, 7th grade, I would wash my hair in the sink and then go out to catch the bus without drying it. I would let the water freeze in my hair and then comb the water out. Really stupid things. And the same thing like that, going for 3, 4, 5 days in a row without sleeping, it's not hard. It's real easy. The way that you do it is to have way too much work to do. If you have way too much work to do, there's no way you'll finish it without sleeping. Guess what's going to go out the window? But if you do that too much, you destroy your circadian rhythms. And like I said, I sleep 3 hours at a time, which is nice. When I really need to work, it's no big deal. I can work myself to exhaustion, sleep for 3 hours and get up and do it again. I can work, 21 hours a day. But the backside of that is I don't have anything left of a normal human relationship to the hours of the day.
That's great.
That's great.
Before we just jumped right in here. Yeah.
Right.
Everybody, hey, welcome to the Build and Grow with Real Estate show. We do a live broadcast every day at noon right here on a couple different platforms on Facebook, live on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody being here. This is our 102nd show. If you like this show, give us a like, give us a comment. Josh and I are always very interested in what people think about the show and what other topics we should be covering. We are built for real estate investors. We're built for realtors. We're built for those two groups of people specifically. But, if you're a renter and thinking about becoming a homeowner, or if you're a homeowner thinking about buying your first investment property, give us a listen, and we've got lots of great content. Josh, now that we're above 100 shows, we could sell this and be syndicated. That's the in the old broadcast days.
Hello, Spotify.
You had to have 100 shows in order to sell it and try to be broadcast. So now we can be syndicated.
I love it, man. Let's do it.
Hey, so our guest today is Greg Swan from Arizona. I've known Greg for a while. Greg is a deep thinker and an intellectual, and he and I are fast friends for a number of reasons. And we also happen to both be in real estate. I would have tremendous amounts of love and respect and appreciation for this man, even if we both weren't in real estate, but we are both in real estate. And he is a Bloodhound Realty from Arizona. And what's great about Greg is he loves people. He loves passionate people. He loves intellectual conversation that's meaningful, that's not petty sniping. And he also loves Arizona and is a big proponent of it's so great, like on Facebook, like he'll take a picture of like just a beautiful desert flower, and he's like, wouldn't it be great to see this? And or I'll take a screenshot in the middle of winter of like what the temperature is, you know what I mean, and it's like 75 degrees, and he's like, it's gonna be a chilly balmy 75. I might put on pants today when I go for a bike ride.
There was a time when I was very serious about marketing our business. I'm not now, But there was a time when I was very serious about growth, and I considered, we never did it, but I considered putting a billboard up in the Loop with nothing but continuous reporting on Phoenix weather. In the Loop in Chicago. This is Chicago feeds Phoenix anyway. Phoenix is Chicago, the largest suburb of Chicago. Not also Minneapolis, St. Paul, half of Western Canada, et cetera. But Chicago fed a lot of people here, and putting that in the Loop would have just been, I think, the perfect real estate advertising, because in the dead of the winter when you're so sick of it. Oh, yeah, and that's how we did it with spring training. Spring training is what grew Phoenix, is the Chicago Cubs in particular. The Cubs had their spring training in Mesa, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and people would come down here for 6 weeks at a time. No kidding. They would rent houses. There were rental houses in Mesa, that seasonal rentals that only did spring training. They were in business for 6 weeks a year, charged an exorbitant amount of rent. The rehab afterward was also exorbitant, but that was the business, was spring training. And so people would come down here. They would have relatives living down here or whatever. They would come down in the winter to visit for a week, and they'd end up staying for 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 7 weeks. Finally, they say, get on the phone, get a realtor, go find yourself a place to live. And that's how we populated this valley.
How long have you been in the Arizona area?
We moved here permanently in 1991, but I first came here in 1988. And I was on a contract, and I was only here briefly. And as soon as I stepped out of the airport at Sky Harbor and saw the greenest grass I had ever seen in my life. Unbelievable green. You've never seen green like this, not on television, not anywhere. And I said, oh my God. And I knew I was home. As soon as I stepped out of the airport, I knew I was home. I'd never felt that way anywhere else ever again. And so I campaigned for the whole time I was here to stay, and I didn't get to, and I campaigned for 3 years to get back, and finally did. I would never leave. The only other place I could live now is Las Vegas, and not even Las Vegas because of the gambling. Blue Diamond, a suburb, amazing little suburb of Las Vegas. But other than that, there's nothing for me but here. And where we live now, we live backing the New River, which is, you would call it a flood control channel. It's a river 13 days a year. But it's wild. It's wild desert in the middle of the city. I've got a half mile of wild desert right behind me. It's just unbelievable. This is the most amazing place in the world to live. I could rhapsodize Arizona indefinitely. When I used to work with buyers, man, I think they used to weep. Greg, please shut up. There's got to be something else.
And you say when you used to work with buyers, what are you doing right now? And then my follow-up question is, dear listeners, half the reason I have somebody like Greg on is because Greg is even though he's in Arizona, he's in a similar market to where we are. I would say, we're going to have 500 to 700 people watch this. And about 80% of them are in central Pennsylvania. So we are, a lot of people push into central PA from Philadelphia and New York and up from Baltimore and DC. And we're seeing a lot of that both in buying rental properties, buying second homes, buying properties to Airbnb here. So I think that we're seeing a lot of what you're seeing in Arizona, but from Chicago, like you said, which is funny to think of Arizona as a Chicago suburb, and obviously the People's Republic of California.
The big fights at the Diamondback games are when the Cubs are in town,
right?
Because they've got two sets of completely dedicated fans in one stadium.
That's true. That's awesome. That's really interesting. So what are you doing right now? So you're not working with buyers anymore. So are you mostly on the listing side?
I represent investors. I list. But I list by repeats and referrals. We don't market for new business at all right now. I represent investors. You choose your level of poverty is what it boils down to. If I wanted to be richer, I'd work harder. There's a balance to my life that I didn't have 10 years ago, and I'm very grateful to have it. And it shows in all kinds of ways, but especially in my marriage. And that would be, you ask me, how can I work superhuman hours? My answer would be to you, how can I have a superhuman marriage? Because that's the goal of your life is marriage, family, household, work, in that order. And work is what you do to finance the household. The household is what you do to house the family. And the family is what you do to treasure your marriage, because that's what you're going to have after all the rest of it is gone.
Yeah.
And so my life is much better now. I work less. I make a lot less. I represent investors particularly from California, but from all over the world. I think my farthest flung investor is in Malaysia. I don't represent any investors in Phoenix. I don't think we ever have. We have on the buy side, but not in property management. I manage a small number of properties. We are very aggressive about tenant selection, so we never have a problem. I haven't had a problem throughout the pandemic. The pandemic has changed two things about my life. I am now my own barber. In a year, I'll be good at it. And I drive a whole lot less than I did 6 months ago. That's the only real change that the pandemic has affected in my business. I'm about to list a house. It'll list October 8th. And I'm really eager to see what happens because we're being invaded by California in particular. It's not really Illinois right now, although I don't really know where people are coming from, but we can really tell that they're coming from California because they're coming.
So let's talk for a minute, if you don't mind. All right. So you said you deal with investors that are primarily or not from Phoenix. They're not in the local market. So how do you contact these people? Like how do they get in touch with you? And obviously you've got your blog, your bloodhoundblog.com. I'm telling you, I read through it this morning in preparation here. Yeah. Obviously not every entry, but you got a lot of great content on here. And I love your perspective on some of the things that we're seeing in the news and all that kind of stuff. Do people typically go through your website, or do they, they just, is it because of your longevity, or how did you start interacting with investors from far away?
We always, from the very beginning, I got my license 2001. I got my real estate license, so it's not quite 20 years. I got my broker's license in 2005, but from the very beginning, we pitched for business on the internet. I've never done it any other way. I started off doing apartment locating. That was my first, where my license was for my first broker, and I did that for a year. Okay. Even then, I mean, I built a site called theapartmentstore.org or something like that. It doesn't exist anymore, but it drew by SEO. In those days, it was easy. We didn't do anything other than SEO, and it was easy, and it just came tripping in through the door. But we built Bloodhound Blog, and Bloodhound Blog, when we built it in the good old days, was really, really huge. I mean, really big. It was PR6 at one point, a really big weblog. It's not that way now. We neglected it. We let it slide when social media came along, and I'm trying to rebuild it now. Brian Brady and I are trying to rebuild it. We've invited Judah Hoover to be one of our contributors because he has so much to offer, and particularly so much to offer to people in the real estate market right now. But everything we always did was by way of the internet. And so bloodhoundrealty.com, which is my brokerage's site, drew very well. Bloodhound Blog never drew business. It was never meant to. And like you said, you want to minimize the amount of pitching. I don't care for that at all. If you have to pitch for business, you probably don't deserve it. If you can't communicate your value, simply talking about what you do, if the people that you're talking to don't recognize that value without being arm twisted, you're probably not their guy anyway. And that's always been my approach to sales. I only do business with people who really want to do business with me. And now, like I said, it's all repeats and referrals. I don't do business with strangers. Right. And that's a choice. 10 years ago, it was different. I mean, every call that came in over the transom, right away, Greg was back there and talked to people. But we just saw in Long Island last fall, a whole bunch of realtors who probably sacrifice their careers by doing business with strangers, and that's one of the reasons why I don't do it.
Say more about that. What do you mean? What do you mean? In Long Island,
you get a call. You get a cold call over the transom, an inbound call. How wonderful! It's an inbound call. I didn't have to pay for this lead. I didn't have to call. I didn't have to follow up. I didn't have to bang on doors. I got a brand new lead over the phone, but it's a stranger. You don't know anything about this person. You don't know what their motives are, and you don't know why they called you in the first place.
Yeah.
And I don't want to impugn the motives of people who call realtors that they don't know, because if you don't have a relationship, you don't have a relationship. But if you're doing business with strangers and at the same time you are sliding right up against legal violations, then you, as far as you know, you're dealing with a shopper. How do you know you're not dealing with a shopper? And
what are you talking about?
I'm in property management, but believe me, I know about shoppers because it's half the calls I get when I have a vacant listing. Half the calls I get are from
tester. Josh.
You call them testers, yeah, whatever. And I don't have a problem with equal opportunity laws in general. To the contrary, and I know that we are overrepresented in disproportionate impact terms. We are overrepresented on protected categories, and that's not by intention either. It's just the luck of the draw. It's just the way things worked out. Like I said, we're very serious about tenant selection. Yeah. So we end up surfacing the best tenants, and it doesn't really matter. The only color we can see is green. But
amen, brother. I always say, I don't care if you're white, green, black, or plaid. I want to approve you for a house. That's what I'm interested in.
If you qualify, you qualify. And if you don't, in many cases, I will tell you what's working against you and how to make the problem go away going forward.
Can qualify.
Well,
exactly.
I need to take 3 steps back. What the heck happened in Long Island? What are you talking about?
Newsday hired or used reporters. I don't know if they recruited people or what, but they used like 14 individuals of various protected categories to go out and shop for fair housing violators. And they found them. Steering violations mainly. But if you go back last fall, Newsday newspaper on Long Island, and it was a huge, huge deal. And I don't know what's become of it since then. I don't know what the local boards have done about it, but it was a great big scandal. And for the most part, I mean, I read the stories and I read the details on what the agents did. And for the most part, it was really unobjectionable activity, technically illegal, but not objectionable and really client focused. In other words, really fiduciary in the sense of trying to do the very best by those clients, but nevertheless technically illegal. And they were looking for technical violations and they found them, like a huge number of them among these agents that they essentially preyed upon. And Josh, this is a very good reason. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Josh, isn't it funny that Greg said to us just before we went live on the air that he wasn't sure that he was going to have enough to say or be able to. Greg speaks so fast. He has so much to say, and there is so much rich content. I mean, we're not going to go there, but start talking about eternal things. Start talking about I'm a born again Christian believer, right? Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. Greg Swan is an atheist, doesn't believe in any of that or anything like that. And yet we have some of the most mutually beneficial and enlightening conversations. I mean, I'm eating this up and we're just talking about real estate. You should see when we start talking about philosophical and soul type human issues. He's
all right. Listen, let me give you a category to unite all of this, Judah. And I know you've seen this from me on Facebook, but I'll give you a category to unite all of this. I am an atheist who believes very much in the importance of family, especially fatherhood. Father-led families are where good children come from, and good children become good mothers and fathers. That good families raise good families. Judah believes that. He's a Christian. I know a Vietnamese family. I love their daughter. I wrote a short story about her because I love her so much. They believe the same thing. There are all kinds of doctrines that you could name where there are massive differences. And if you talked about the details of the doctrines, you'd end up in a civil war in no time. But if you get down to the heart of the matter, the real roots of the matter, especially marriage, family, fatherhood, faith, all of those things, following through on the things that you believe in, holding up your ideals, those things unite all of these different doctrinal beliefs. And the thing that unites them all is found in Aesop's fable of the grasshopper and the ants. That Judah is an ant. I'm an ant. I'm going to assume that you're an ant also, that the Vietnamese family that I know are ants, that all of the various Christian denominations that uphold fatherhood and family are ants. All of the wonderful Black churches that produce these amazing, wonderful families, that produce these amazing people that do all of these amazing things in business, they're ants. We're looking at the world right now through a prism of black and white. We're looking at it as if this were a race war that we're living through. It's not. We're living through a civil war between the grasshoppers and the ants. And realtors, lenders, investors, everybody in the real estate business obviously they're all obviously ants because we build things that we don't want to see burn down.
Right. Let me just say something here. So what's so great about that, Greg, is last week, 2 weeks ago, Josh and I talked about market cycles and how, we're in this market, then we're in that market, and you can kind of see what market is coming next based on what market you're in right at that point and what some of those hallmarks are. And one of the things that we walked away with that saying is, it doesn't matter. I'm not scared for the next market cycle, whatever it is, because I'm just going to adapt to what that is, because I never put it this way, but I love the way you say it, because I'm an ant.
Right.
Like, and actually what's funny is the next market cycle that's coming is a downturn. We're going to see, whether it's in 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 years, where a downturn is obviously what's coming next. And that's, people are either afraid of the next market cycle. They're especially afraid if the next market cycle happens to be a downturn. I don't care either way, because I'm just going to learn what the new rules are, figure out where we are, adapt, and overcome. And as long as you have an ant mentality, we never talked about it in those terms, but as long as you have an ant mentality, you're fine in the real estate world, or as a servicer, as a service provider to the real estate world.
Right. Certainly for brokers, it's no big deal up or down because you don't own the inventory.
Right.
As long as you can move the inventory, it doesn't really matter. As long as you can make it sell up or down, it doesn't really matter. I don't want to sell into a down market. I don't want to sell into price reductions, et cetera. But that could easily be the case 2 years from now. And again, it's going to be really spotty over the next year anyway, because we're bleeding big cities white and we're pumping small cities full of people. Meanwhile, we're not, I don't know what building is like where you are, but we're nowhere near where we need to be to build. In 2006, we were building like crazy, and then the market collapsed. All of the crews who were building those houses went and did other things, moved away. They have other jobs. They're involved in other things. That the builders are getting orders like crazy. I know that they're signing paperwork like crazy, but they don't have anywhere near the crews they need to build them. And so usually it's a 10-month turnaround from vacant lot to you can move in. I can't imagine that they can turn those houses around in 10 months now. And that'll be the case for the next 4 or 5 years. They will not be able to build enough in Phoenix for the next 4 or 5 years. So we're going to see price growth, even if, I don't guarantee it for 4 or 5 years, but we're going to continue to see price growth after other cities are on the downside of the curve, because they're going to be losing population. What's really going to hurt them is not market cycles, but literally the loss of demography, the loss of population.
Well, so let's go back to the end of the last cycle, right? The whole market crash. I actually bought a couple houses from people that were relocating to Phoenix, right about the time when the market just tanked, right? And I thought it was an interesting market because Phoenix, it just got huge, and then it collapsed. And there was a guy I knew out of Florida that was he was sending out 150,000 postcards a month. The guy did massive mass mail, and he actually ended up working with Blackstone and a couple of the larger, hedge funds that were buying up some of these single families. And Phoenix was one of the areas that they were concentrating.
Right. And still are, by the way, they're still here. Well, I don't know about Blackstone, but hedge funds are still here, still buying. I get 3 emails a day. Okay, guys, do you have anything off market, anything vacant, anything coming up?
Well, so this is my question. Don't you think that there's a concern, or is there a concern there where, you just have so much competition in the market and it drives prices higher and higher and higher? And if you're an investor, like, you can either be into flip, right? And if you're into flip, usually you're looking at a short enough time frame that you can get in and out before the market completely tanks or whatever. But if you're in for the long term and you buy in thinking that this is a 5-year play and like maybe it's break even cash flow, but like the market's going like this the whole time, and now all of a sudden it's going like this and you're break even.
I had a bunch of people like that in 2005. I'm sorry to say I did. I had a bunch that bought on the way up and really got hurt on the way down.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, if you're going to hold for 20 years, it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't. And that's the real deal, is that I would never say to a buy and hold investor, anticipate selling in 5 years. I would say 7 to 8 at a minimum, because you just can't predict market cycles. But what you can do is anticipate if it's going to be 7 or 8, then it might be 16 or 18. And you need to think that way also, because if you miss the top for whatever reason, then you might have to wait through it a second time. But it's not the end of the world. Certainly not in Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix, sad to say, Phoenix collapses to the ashes and rises to the stars again and again and again. We are a very cyclical market. I hope that changes someday, but it's the way it is now. We're going to benefit now because of coronavirus and because of all of this turmoil in big cities. But eventually, Phoenix will turn again. And a whole bunch of my investors, I've been talking to them for the past year, saying, you ought to start thinking about it. Now's going to be the time. Now's the time to think about it. And it turns out I was wrong, because events intruded. And that's what you can't count on when you're investing for the long term, is you can't count on events happening when you want them to. But the market will come back your way if you hang in there.
Now is the time to list and sell. You were saying to your friends, now is the time to list and sell.
I'd say to the investors that now's the time to think about getting out of it. That we bought these houses 2008, 2009. The houses that we bought for $70,000 to $90,000, put 10 to 15 into them. They're now worth $250,000, $260,000. They're going to be worth $300,000 by the end of the year. Right. Meanwhile, they were all cash flow positive from the beginning. Think about that. You bought a house for $85,000, put 15 into it. You're in it for $100,000. It leases for $1,000. This is real good money from the very beginning. It's real good income the whole time, plus depreciation, etc. Everything that goes into holding something for a while.
Principal reduction. Everybody always forgets about principal reduction.
Refinances. Many of these were bought for cash, but some were bought financed, and they've been refinanced subsequently when rates were favorable. And then meanwhile, when you go to sell it, that you're looking at, at a 3-to-1 return on the initial investment. And if you leverage that, then what are we at now? 12-to-1?
Right.
Unbelievable money. I mean, and this is, buy low, sell high, blah, blah, blah. That's the big joke. Well, that just means have a lot of cash when nobody else does, and have a lot of housing when everybody else has a lot of cash. That's what it literally means. And that's what my investors it's not my brilliance that's making them rich. It's their prior acquisition of cash and having the cash available when the opportunity was there that is presenting this opportunity.
On that note, what are you recommending to your investors now? I mean, what?
Sit tight. That's all we're doing. We did one in March where I really thought we should have sold. And that was not even March. It might have been February. It was before coronavirus, before all this happened. Right. And I really thought we should have sold, and the rehab costs were huge. And I thought, okay, let's throw the money into it and get out. And the investor didn't want to. And as it turned out, we had like 150 applications. It was huge. It was unbelievable. The demand for the place. We leased it for the whole year. In other words, the tenant paid the entire year in advance. Right. So the rehab costs got covered right then. The investor was happy, and he continues to own it. And I know it's appreciated 3-4% since then. So he was wise to hang on to it. My advice was poor, I admit it. It's only poor about half the time. The other half the time it's brilliant. But but he was wise to keep it. And now the next 2 or 3 years, obviously the appreciation will continue as long as we have this inflow of population without the ability to build new supply to accommodate it. We're going to continue to see prices go up here. So all of my investors from now, I'm just saying, just sit tight. There's no reason not to. Like I said, I have one that's selling in October because he's got a 1031 opportunity. That's the only reason. And that's the only reason that I would say to investors to sell right now is if you can 1031 into something that either offers growth or at least parks the money with no losses, then that might be an ideal time to sell, because you've got so much appreciation in this home and there's no guarantee that it will continue. Whereas if you can park the money and defer the taxes until you retire, then it might make sense that way. And this investor owns 3 houses in one subdivision in Phoenix. He's selling one of them to 1031 into something. I don't know what. He didn't even tell me. I don't care. It's not my business. It's not my problem. It's just my problem to deliver the cash, and we'll do it. It won't be a problem at all.
Yeah, we see. Here's the thing. So we're wrapping up here. We need to have Greg back on and talk about Josh, like in future shows. Like, we can have him back on and talk about his. I owned a mortgage company for 15 years, right? I understand and have read a whole bunch of appraisals. So I read and understand appraisals. I was also a rehabber and flipper and a hard money lender, putting my money into other people's properties. So I get how to value properties and the several different ways to value properties. Greg is great when it comes to talking about valuing properties. Greg is great when it comes to talking about also, screening tenants and reading the tea leaves and what's coming. Certainly nobody's perfect, but Greg just has a wide sage look on a bunch of this stuff. And I think we need to have him back on again, as long as he would be agreeable. But here's what we do with our show, Greg. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we cover content. Okay. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this week, we talked about filling vacancies, how to market properties, how to screen properties, what to do when the tenant moves in, and things like that. If you're new, just listening today, go back and check out our shows this week. They're just a half an hour piece, and we talked about those things. On Thursday, we always have a guest. And then on Friday, we do a news wrap up where we talk about the news of the week as it relates to real estate. And that's
no evictions till Christmas.
Ooh, yeah, I got to tell you.
That's the news of the week.
We were wrong about that yesterday, Josh. I said that, we were ready to file 85 evictions yesterday. And that was just 3 months worth of evictions in 1 week, because Pennsylvania, there was a eviction moratorium, and I know every state was doing things differently. I don't know what they were doing out there in Arizona, but we haven't been able to file for evictions for a long time. And everybody thought that, there was going to be a spike in evictions because everyone is so economically depressed that therefore they weren't able to pay rent, that therefore there was going to be a lot of evictions. But between unemployment and the stimulus, and actually the economy not really being that bad, and people
working despite the rules, the traffic tells you that people are working.
Exactly. So, and if you put the right person in, if you put ants in your property to begin with, ants are going to find a way.
They'll follow through. That's what we look for. That's what we look for, is evidence of follow through. That's what we look for, because follow through is all that matters. The people who will follow through will follow through.
Right. So here's a little hot tip for you guys. Josh, we talked about screening tenants.
Yep.
I look for people when I'm talking to them. Tell me about your job and tell me about your last job. Tell me about where you live and tell me about where you lived before that. If somebody, you can tell in 3 minutes. If it's always somebody else's fault,
right?
I don't want them. You know what
exactly.
I mean? If they're always blaming somebody, well, I had this job, but see, my supervisor, he did blah, blah, blah. So I could only last there for about 3 months. And then I was over here and it was too far to really get to work. And it wasn't on the bus line and this and that. Like if it's always somebody else's fault.
The longer the story, the less I believe it.
Right.
Nice.
You fill me up with details. I know you're lying.
Right. Oh, that's so.
But this is exactly right. All of that works for real estate clients too. Is to, tell me about. Have you ever had an unhappy experience with a realtor? You're doing the interview, trying to figure out if you want to make this person a client or not. Did you ever have an unhappy experience with a realtor? I want to hear your unhappy stories, because if you're a WAMU customer, is that who it is? Washington Mutual, is that
Mutual? WAMU, yeah.
The WAMU advertises for complainers. They advertise for complainers. Their commercials are filled with complainers, and all they're doing is recruiting complainers as customers. I know that complainers aren't satisfied, won't be satisfied, and are likely to sue. I've never been sued. We don't do evictions, Judah. That's something we should talk about someday. We don't do forcible retainers ever. But this is one of those things that if you recognize when you're talking to someone that they have a complaint with everybody, guess what? They're going to have a complaint with you too.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, we got to jump because we've got to honor our time commitment. Greg, stick around. We're gonna play our extra music here, and everyone else is going to go away. But I want to talk to you for 3 minutes off the air. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Build and Grow with Real Estate Show. My name is Judah Hoover. I'm a realtor, and I definitely want to list your properties, be it personal or investment properties. Josh Weidman right over here is a hard money lender and can get you all the money you need for all your flips. Our guest today was Greg Swan with the Bloodhound Realty blog, and he is a deep thinker on so many levels. I promise you, if you find him and follow him on Facebook, you will be blessed and you will not be upset for the experience. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks and have a great day.
Hey, real quick, shout out to Jeff Kennedy, Taz Journey, Bayshore Travis, Jason Sanservino from last week. Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Brandon Keener and Steve Carney. Thanks for the love, guys. If you're watching this show and you liked what you saw, don't forget to like and share it. We'll see you back here tomorrow at noon for our news roundup. See you guys.